Evening. My name is Ming Cabrera. I am part of the Democrat Central Committee in Yellowstone County. And today we have Buzz Mattelin and Whitney Williams. And Whitney is running for governor, and Buzz is her partner as lieutenant governor. How are you guys doing? How are you doing, Whitney?
I'm good, Ming. So nice to see you.
Thank you. Buzz, how are you up there in Poplar today? You doing fine? In Culbertson?
Doing well, thanks, Ming.
Wonderful. Well, we'll begin right now. One of the first questions I always ask right now is, well, Whitney, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, of course. Well, thanks again, Ming, and thanks to you and all the Yellowstone County Democrats. Buzz and I are sorry, given the circumstances, that we're not able to travel to see you in person, but soon enough, hopefully, we'll all be back together. So I, Ming, am a sixth generation Montanan. My mama's family came to Montana, homesteaded here during the gold rush. Originally came to sort of Harrison and then Jefferson City, and ultimately ended up in Butte. And I was a little girl in Helena. I grew up at the corner of Jerome and Fee. And then around 1978, Montanans were very good, made a smart decision, elected my dad, Pat Williams, to be the member of Congress from the Western District part of the state. And so I moved back east with my mom and dad, where dad served the people of Montana. And then fast forward, I ended up back here in Montana. I'm sitting in Missoula right now, where I went to college. And then about 5-6 years out of college, I decided to start my own company. So now, about 20 years ago, created a successful company that I founded and still run called williamsworks, which helps people from Fortune 500 companies to private citizens tackle really complex problems and help people who are struggling. And I am, first and foremost, a Montanan. I am in love with my state, as the rest of us are. And I feel extremely grateful to be able to have this remarkable opportunity to run and serve as Montana's next governor. You're on mute, Ming. You got to unmute. There you go.
An interesting story. My mom and your mom used to work together years and years ago in Butte, Montana. So we always told that story a long time. So it's kind of interesting.
Look at what I have, Ming.
Yeah.
I got, you can see
in Montana.
Wear and tear. Little Pat mug. That was from the 92 Marlin race, actually.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you might notice the colors of my signs and Buzz's signs mirror the color of this mug. And actually, the other thing that these colors are also the colors of the Women's Protective Union, which but was Montana. It was actually America's oldest all-female union. It's America's longest lasting all-female union. And all these amazing women and our families in Butte were members of that union. And they also used blue and gold. So when we were picking colors for the campaign, it seemed like two good reasons to do that. And then the third might be that it's also the Montana flag.
Well, thank you, Whitney. Now, for us, this will be the first time for us here in Montana to actually learn a little bit about Buzz Mattelin, up in beautiful Culbertson area, one of my favorite places in the whole world. Buzz, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thanks, Ming. I'm a farmer, and I've been farming for actually a little over 4 decades. I grow sugar beets, malt barley, durum wheat, and peas and lentils, and a little bit of hay on my farm here west of Culbertson. In addition to building my farm business, raising my family in Northeast Montana and rural schools and rural healthcare, I've had the good fortune to be a proponent for Montana agriculture. First as president of Montana Association of Conservation Districts, so the conservation movement, and then appointed by Governor Schweitzer and again by Governor Bullock to the Montana Wheat and Barley Committee. And for those of you that don't know, that committee uses checkoff dollars from every bushel of wheat and barley sold to do education, research, and marketing. And part of the marketing part is to do overseas tours or trade missions. And it's amazing that, you know, the majority of our grain goes into Asia, Japan, Korea, and those places. But they're very interested in meeting the farmers and learning about how we grow the wheat. You know, is it safe? You know, what chemicals we do, all those kind of things. So, and then being a farmer on the Missouri River, I've been involved in Missouri River issues on a basin-wide scale for almost 3 decades. In the last 10 years, as part of a group called Missouri River Recovery Implementation Committee, which deals with endangered species on the river, specifically in our area, pallid sturgeon, and has a large effect on how the dam at Fort Peck is managed, and I guess how people in agriculture use the water. So that's a little bit about me. I'm married. I have 2 adult kids and 3 grandkids that live in Missoula. So I always like to say Montana is a huge state, but a small community. And we just proved that with Ming, that, you know, in 5 minutes of conversation, you have people that you know in common. So that's typical in Montana.
Thanks, Buzz. Yeah, wherever you go and you say you're from Montana, you say you're from Poplar, and then you always say, do you know? And we always
Right.
know somebody in common, which is just unbelievable. And everybody, like, I go to Disneyland or Disney World, and they're saying, oh my gosh, you people in Montana know everybody. And we just kind of smile when we do
It's
that.
true.
Thank you so much, Buzz. We'll get back to you in just a second. Whitney, one of the questions we always ask is, what made you want to run?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a great question, Ming. You know, first of all, I suppose I just believe that Montana is really at a crossroads. And I think voters, you know, have a really clear choice in this primary. I think primaries are really good for our party. I think primaries are good for democracy. And, you know, I believe that there's sort of a new focus on Montana's future. And I believe that that's what Buzz and I bring to this ticket. You know, I believe always in our tomorrows, and I know that Montanans do too. And so I think this sort of sense of, you know, thinking toward the future and having a new generation of leadership to lead this state forward is a big part of why, you know, why I'm here. I mean, these are really challenging times. Of course, before coronavirus, I think we were all feeling that these were challenging times, and now we have to rebuild our economy. And I just fundamentally believe that Montana is ready for a new generation of leadership with new ideas and new approaches that has experience not just in government, but also in the private sector as well. As I mentioned, you know, at the beginning, am a businesswoman. You know, my opponent in this primary has been in government for 4 decades. I'm a 6th-generation Montanan. You know, I started my business 20 years ago. Buzz also as a farmer, you know, is a businessman. And I have had the real privilege and pleasure to be able to work with people around the globe, including lots of folks in agriculture, lots of farmers who are struggling, you know, after disaster strikes, whether it's natural disasters like Puerto Rico and that terrible Hurricane Maria, or man-made disasters like I experience regularly in the Congo, where I have an office. And, you know, I'm the only Democrat running for governor who's created jobs after disaster strikes and helped communities, you know, to rebuild. So I believe that my executive experience, the leadership sort of developed working both in government, as I did in the federal government, in the Clinton administration in the 90s, and the state legislature here in Montana in the 90s as well, combined with my business experience, having been an executive, makes me the best positioned Democrat to defeat Greg Gianforte, who I believe is going to be the nominee. You know, the challenges ahead are like any challenges we've seen in our lifetime. And getting folks working again and helping businesses rebuild, I think, is going to take new energy and new ideas and a new generation of leadership. And, you know, fundamentally, Montana is just going to face, as is the rest of the country, a whole series, I think, of tough challenges, starting with controlling coronavirus and ensuring that Montanans are healthy and safe. And then, being very focused on rebuilding our economy, which is job number one. Health insurers and big pharma continue to take advantage of Montana families, and politicians in Washington are either sitting on the sidelines or actively, like Greg Gianforte and Steve Daines, trying to take away our access to healthcare. Public education is under attack here in Montana. We've got Greg Gianforte actively lobbying the Supreme Court on this Espinoza case to take hard-earned taxpayer dollars and put those into religious schools. We've got to stop that. Women's healthcare funding, access to abortion and reproductive health are under attack. And there again, we need a governor that is tough enough to make sure that we stop those things from happening. And then finally, Ming, I'll say, wealthy out-of-staters who we welcome to Montana, right? They're welcome. They can come, they can spend their money, they can enjoy themselves, but they ought to be paying a little bit more. And I think it's time that we put, some things in place so that they do. And, ultimately, I think these new challenges require a new kind of leadership. And so that's why I'm in this race.
Thanks, Whitney. I appreciate that. I'd like to talk to Buzz now. Buzz, you give a great perspective and a different freshness to this campaign, being a farmer and a rancher. Could you give us a little bit of reasons why you want to run too, to be up there in the limelight like this, Buzz?
Sure, thanks, Min, and thanks for the question. This wasn't something I had intended to do, but when I was approached about the possibility of being on the ticket, I listened and I thought about it. And, after hours and hours of conversation, both in person and on the phone with Whitney, I've learned that she's a problem solver. And the way that she does that is to bring diverse groups together for really sustainable solutions. And it gave me the idea, I guess, that I could represent all the things that I'm passionate about: agriculture, rural Montana, rural education, rural healthcare, Eastern Montana, the problems we deal with the energy industry, the Bakken oil field, all those things, and that I would have some influence in Helena that we haven't had. I'm 460 miles, I think, from Helena. That's a long ways. And, a lot of times we just kind of get lost in the shuffle over in Eastern Montana. So the possibility of having that strong voice and bringing the things that rural people deal with to the table was the reason I joined the ticket. And then being part of the new ideas that Whitney brings. She's really an extraordinary person and had extraordinary experiences in her life. And even though we come from very different backgrounds, we share some really common Montana values. We care about all the people in Montana, not just the wealthy or not just the business folks. We care about everybody. And then our concern about the natural resources, our clean water and clean air. And, I think too often we stay in these silos that I only talk to ag people, or somebody only talks to conservation people that are, the green folks say. And we need to interact. And I think that's what this ticket brings, different perspectives from different people in different parts of the state. So I'm excited about it, and that's why I'm running.
Thanks, Buzz. It's great that you're out there and that you have that agricultural background that we desperately need. As you know, the issues are there for us, and we've got to find ways to meet them. Now, let's just change.
Can I just say, can I just add one more thing? Because I think this is so important. And I think, for those of us who are, lifelong Democrats and care very much about, ensuring that we have people sort of reflect the values of our party and of us as individuals, I do think, this is a really important moment, this primary, because Buzz is all the way over in Roosevelt County, as far as you can go, just about in Montana. And I do believe that as Democrats, we can do better for rural communities and smaller towns and the agricultural communities. I think it's something that we just haven't done as well as we could. And I think this is a moment where, you know, Brian Schweitzer, we're super honored and delighted that Brian, also a businessman who then became governor, endorsed us. Buzz and I are delighted. You know, Brian similarly also had, you know, experience as a business person and as a farmer before he went on to become a very successful governor. And Brian really did a good job in, I think, farming communities and agricultural communities. And I think as a party, we should really strive to bring some of that back. And that's part of what Buzz and I aim to do.
Thank you, Whitney. That's very good. I appreciate that. Let's just change the subject real quick about COVID-19 right now. Has there been what has been your role with that, and were there any benefits to how we handled it? Do you see anything good about what's going on right now with COVID-19 and some of the things you're seeing?
Yeah, well, I would just say briefly, I mean, I'm really, you know, very pleased, as I think most of us are, feeling very lucky that Steve was governor. I think he has done a really good job at the handling of this crisis. I mean, clearly the public health and safety, following medical professionals and experts and the science and the data and the facts is what Steve has done. And that has led to flattening the curve. You know, and Montanans deserve a lot of credit too. You know, we stayed home. People really did sort of listen to that and sort of lock down in the way that we needed to get this crisis under control. And so, you know, Buzz and I both have been doing the same thing, which is staying home. What it has meant for us, of course, on the campaign trail is just that we had to pivot the way that we do our work on the campaign by doing things like this, Ming, and You're Good to Organize This. And, you know, so many others have been doing those throughout the day, every day. But in terms of the, you know, states handling, I think that, again, I think Steve's done a really good job. I think that the fact that you look at some of the states around us who didn't follow the same sort of order around shutting things down in the organized way with which Steve did it, and you've seen that the numbers are much higher in those places. So I think there's clear evidence in these states around us where there was the lack of that kind of leadership that I think was really important. And, you know, certainly, I mean, as a small business person myself, and just as a Montanan like the rest of us, you know, it is a really difficult time. And so certainly I think we're all hopeful that we can reopen sooner than later, but a recovered economy will not happen without a healthy public. And so we have to all be for health and safety first, and then roll up our sleeves together and get to work on what's next.
Thank you, Whitney. Buzz, I'm really interested in your perspective on COVID-19 being in a rural area of the world right now. So what are you hearing from the rural farmers and ranchers? I think it's going to be interesting.
So we were deemed an essential service. So in some ways, our life has not changed as much as we've been socially distancing for a long time, I think. But, you know, I'm also president of National Barley Growers Association. And as we have got into this, ag has had a little bit of a lag time, I guess, in terms of the effects. It hasn't been immediate, like, you know, closing of a restaurant. But we're starting to see that the supply chain's backed up, and we're trying to work with farmers and people that contract things like malt barley. We found out, I think last week, that Malt Europe in Great Falls is shut down because they're full of barley, they're full of malt. Some of their outlets, which was Mexico, have closed their breweries, so things are backing up. And I think we're seeing that in, you know, in the livestock industry and in some of the other grains. But our effects, I think, are a little bit delayed. So, you know, the other thing that we're doing is making sure that we get this crop planted, that we have all the things we need, the seed, the fertilizer, the crop health products, so that we don't have a food shortage next year, that we have a crop and we can go forward. But I think the other thing, and Whitney mentioned it, I mean, it's really to believe the science of this. And I see that as a real challenge in our society today, that people don't believe in science. I'm not sure how exactly we do that, other than use the experts. And I give Governor Bullock great credit for keeping us safe in the state and keeping the numbers as low as possible.
Thank you. Whitney, if you were elected, what would you continue to do or what would you change?
Sorry, Ming, Whitney's just dialing back in. I think that she just got disconnected.
Oh, okay. Buzz, I'm going to just give you that question.
Okay.
If you were elected,
Okay.
what would you do to continue or change?
You know, I think as we've gone through these trade wars in the past couple of years, we need to do a lot of work. Montana exports 70 to 80% of their grain. And, you know, our traditional customers in Japan and Mexico, we've got to repair some relationships. And Whitney's tasked me with that part of it, said she would send me to work with folks that have been our good customers all these years and try to repair some of those relationships. So the other things, I guess, one of the big things is, you know, in the meat industry right now, you know, there's shortage of meat in grocery stores, and it's because 4 big packing companies control 80% of the beef market. We've got to be able to process some of that beef in Montana and able to retail it and put it in our restaurants and sell it to individuals. And we would work hard to do that, to have a statewide or a local market for our beef products. We have more cattle and people in Montana, and right now we can't process the beef to feed ourselves. So huge priority. And I think if there's a silver lining to this virus is that it's exposed the weakness in our food chain, and in the meat industry is one of those things that I think there'll be some will to change how our meat's processed and delivered to us.
Wow, very interesting. Never even thought about that, about what's going on with the food chain. I know it's interesting here in the grocery stores as well. What we're seeing for meat, it's been very difficult to get and sometimes short. Whitney, I'm going to give you the same question. If you were elected, what would you continue or what would you change?
Yeah, thanks, Ming. So, I mean, how lucky are we that we had Brian Schweitzer first for 8 years and then Steve Bullock for 8 years. Montana is lucky. I think our party is lucky. I think they've both done such a beautiful job of representing us so well. So let's see. I mean, the challenges ahead of us are new challenges, right? So rebuilding economy after this disaster is certainly going to take new energy and new ideas and a different generation of leadership. And so I would say that I think the problems are just going to be some new problems. I will say a couple of things that we'll be very focused on. You know, one is rebuilding this economy and making sure that we do in fact have an economy that's going to work for folks all across the state, including, as Buzz, just mentioned, which was so helpful, is this issue of, food security, which is real. That this COVID did in fact have a silver lining, and I think a number of them. One of them is Montanans should not only be able to feed ourselves, but we should be able to feed great many people in this country with the extraordinary products that we grow here in Montana. It's also exposed, this lack of connectivity. Broadband, 20-some% of Montanans are still underserved. As we look at the crisis now with COVID and the number of kids that have to be online to learn and do not have access at their homes to be able to do that, we've got to fix that. And we've got to fix it urgently. We need to move forward into a clean energy future. We were just reading a story earlier today about some new efforts underway, particularly in Wyoming and Utah, to capture the wind potential and solar potential in this state. And I think we can do more to move more quickly with urgency into that future. And then, we talked a little bit, Ming, but education. Education, of course, is a birthright for all of us, but here it's so important that we wrote it into our Constitution, and that a good quality public education should be available to all. And that should start with the littlest learners. That should start at 4 years old. We're only a handful of states that hasn't gotten pre-K done. I know people have tried to get it done, but it is past time. And that's one of those things that I think will be a great big focus for us in education, both with earliest learners, as well as making sure that we move to ensure that community colleges, that apprenticeship programs, trades programs, and tribal colleges all have the sort of resources both that they need to open up pathways for good paying jobs for Montana students.
I'm going to ask you to ask one question here with one word, if that's possible. What
Yeah.
makes you different than other candidates, Whitney?
I'm a business person.
Very good. Buzz, what makes you different than any other candidate out there? You're on mute, Buzz.
I'm a farmer.
Wonderful. That's very good. Now, something personal about yourself. Tell us something about what you do or your family or anything you want that you want people to know about you, Buzz.
Who's first, Ming?
You.
Okay. When I started talking about or running the campaign, and we were talking about education, and I knew that my grandmother was a teacher and my mother was a teacher, and I have two sisters that are teachers, and my daughter is a teacher. So I thought I had 4 generations of teachers in my family. And then I found out that my great-grandfather was also a teacher. So 5 generations of teaching in the family. And, education is so important to me. Starting from the very beginning, I guess, as pre-K, as Whitney has said, but all the way through to vocational and things like that. We're hiring people from Denmark over here to help on the farms because we don't have trained folks in Montana. And I think there's good paying jobs. So education, I am so strong about education. That would be something personal.
Thanks, Buzz. And you look like a teacher too, by the way. No, thank you.
I'll take that
Whitney?
as a compliment.
Whitney, tell us something personal about you. Something fun.
Something fun. Okay, so my family comes from Butte. My mom and dad, siblings, everybody born in and partially raised there. My mom and dad's case, raised their whole lives. But my dad was raised with his cousins, and one of those cousins is Evel Knievel. So Evel is my cousin, and I think often we think in our family we're all risk takers in a variety of ways. I think Bobby was his real name, not Evel. I think Bobby's, sort of paved the way for some of that risk taking, but we can tell where it comes from, which we think is that side of my father's family that led to Evel becoming, the greatest daredevil of all time.
Thanks, Whitney. I appreciate it. If anybody wants to get a hold of you right now, the ballots are out. Or is there any web places that they can look you up, Facebook or anything? Could you please?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. So first of all, Buzz and I are always available and very happy to have people contact us directly. So it's just Whitney at whitneyformontana.com or Buzz at whitneyformontana.com are our emails. www.whitneyformontana.com is a great website that has lots of information about endorsements, about policies. We go into our background a little bit more. Lots of the news clips that have come out are captured there as well. And then social media, of course, on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and that's all just Whitney for MT.
Thank you very much. Buzz, thank you. Thank you, Whitney, for your time tonight. And I appreciate all that you're doing and what you will do in the future with us. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you,
Thanks, Ming.
Ming.